Dit is Een Andere Kijk op Zaken, een podcastserie van PwC. Ik ben Paula Seur. Met experts ga ik in gesprek over de uitdagingen en kansen van deze tijd, vanuit verschillende perspectieven. Een andere kijk op zaken. Deze week gaan we het hebben over de weerbaarheid van jouw organisatie. Aan welke knoppen moet je draaien om de onderneming veerkrachtig te maken in onzekere tijden? Daarover praat ik met mijn gasten Matt Mani en Annemieke Hoekstra, beide van PwC. En we praten verder in het Engels. Welcome both, Annemieke, Matt. Good to have you here. This conversation is about how to become more resilient as a company in economically unpredictable times, on how to prepare for the worst or at least for the unexpected. But isn't that more or less what successfully doing business is all about? Being prepared for the unexpected, planning the unplannable?
Well, indeed, it is about planning for the unplannable, but I don't agree with your characterization of saying preparing for the worst. Yes, as a business, you need to look into the future and find that good balance of managing the today and managing for the future at all times. And certainly times like this, which are unpredictable, require you to do that even more.
Because, Annemiek, we're dealing with quite a lot of crises at the same time. Right now, what are the things that are happening to the world at the moment?
Well, I think indeed there's a lot of things, as you said, happening at the same time, right? From inflationary pressures, still the lingering war in the Ukraine, supply chain disruption that we see on a global basis. It is impacting businesses in a way that it has never before, indeed. And maybe it is compounding quite a bit over the last few years in different ways than we have seen in the past.
Not to mention the major trends like the energy transition, the climate crisis.
Absolutely. That is something that impacts every single living being on the planet. So it's inescapable. It's something that, therefore, every institution has to lean into and have a plan for.
We've seen crisis before, Matt. It's part of doing business, isn't it? Handling crisis. So what's different this time?
Yes, there's been many challenges before. And on the one hand, I really do hate it when commenters just say, well, this time is so different. On the other hand, I think what's distinct about the current situation we're living in, yes, we have an economic crisis in terms of recession in some parts of the world. But at the same time, we also have the energy transition happening. We have the climate crisis to deal with. We have a very fundamental rewiring of the world order that is taking place in front of our eyes, not just with the war in Ukraine, but all of the supply chain disruptions and changes that we've seen in the relationship between China and the West, that all of that is coming together all at one time. And you add to that the cycle time for the changes expanding globally is very, very short. With the way that we're connected in the world over social media and in other forms, when something happens that's seemingly small in a certain place, let's say in a market in China, before you know it, it's impacted the whole planet Earth. So that, for me, is quite distinct. And in a time like this, that means businesses and institutions really need to be on top of how they lean into these disruptions.
So everything at the same time, we're in a perfect storm.
Yes, happening very quickly.
You also wrote a book about Beyond Digital. That's the title. What's it about? What's your position?
Well, I'm a partner with PwC. I lead our transformation business for PwC. It's my privilege to do so. And I work with clients on business transformation, and which is a topic that I am fascinated by.
Okay. And in your book, do you address the topic we're talking about today?
We do. The book that Paul Leinwand, my co-author, and I wrote, Beyond Digital, How Great Leaders Transform Their Organizations and Shape the Future, is all about how do you actually transform your organization so that you're taking charge of your own future. Instead of the future shaping you being impacted by what's happening outside of you, how do you actually shape your own direction regardless of all of the disruptions that are happening around?
Okay, and also how to become more resilient as an organization, given all these disruptions.
Not only how to become more resilient, but actually how to generate significantly greater value for your stakeholders and for society.
Okay. And Annemieke, you're a deal maker, right? At PwC.
Well,
you're in the
not
mergers and acquisitions department.
A deal maker. I'm a partner at PwC as well. And indeed, I support clients in mergers and acquisitions. And then particularly in the part when it comes to bringing both organizations together and driving transformational success out of a deal.
Okay. And how is business right now? Amidst all these crises that we're talking about?
Well, it's interesting because people might say that, a crisis, but economically challenging times may not be so great for deals. Actually, the opposite is true. What we see is that transactions that are being done in economically more difficult times are actually more successful. And
how come?
There's a couple of reasons. The challenging conditions make up for better returns because it means that there's different parties at the table. So not everyone is able to participate in a transaction. So there's less competition. It has an impact of valuation of the businesses that are up for sale. And it means that there's new assets coming to the market because both private equity and corporates are rethinking what fits with my portfolio. Is it time to divest? Or in certain cases, businesses may be in distress. And that also means that there's different assets coming to market. So it's actually a great opportunity.
So these are very interesting times, but are they? Is business slow right now because people are hesitant to make big deals, major deals?
We have seen a slowdown over the last maybe half year or so, but it is picking up again. Indeed, some companies were biding a little bit of time to think, is this the right time for myself or do I want to take a bit longer? Now you're seeing that things are picking up again, and particularly for acquiring organizations. And again, whether that's a corporate or a private equity.
So on the buy side,
on the buy side,
it's a great opportunity.
Well,
absolutely.
But you also need a party on the selling side, of course.
True. No, so indeed. But then it comes to, is it still a strategic fit? And whether it's a division or a portfolio company of a private equity, those choices are being made right now. And it does mean for buyers that just buying a company and letting it sit there and hoping that it will magically generate revenues, that doesn't happen. So there is a strong case for what we call transformational M&A at the moment.
Okay, I'm sure you will agree, Matt.
Absolutely. So two things I want to say. One is actually difficult economic times. The reason they produce better quality deals is because they force you to be much more thoughtful and focus on the right assets and the right areas. It also forces you to do better quality deals and not sort of get sloppy and lazy with valuations and how you spend your money. Secondly, even though the transaction volume may be a little bit lower in the first half of the year, I can tell you our business is not slowing down at all. In fact, it's the opposite because of the fact that organizations now recognize they have to transform the assets they're buying. So it's not just buy and integrate and then add the revenue to your top line with some synergy, but it's actually let's integrate the assets in a way that's transformative, that actually creates a new revenue model or some fundamentally improved way of doing business, which requires a lot more operational transformation to be done. And so I think in that case, it's actually incredibly healthy for the general economy as well, and why you see deals of better quality coming out of an environment like this.
Okay. Can you give an example, perhaps? I don't think all market segments have the same characteristics.
Well, there's an organization that Annemieke and I happen to be working with right now that has gone through a pretty important transaction. That transaction was concluded, I would say, right before economic times started to turn, shall we say, not so rosy, not so positive. And the thesis of that transaction was that by adding some new markets to the business, they would have an opportunity to take their core product and scale it into these new markets. Well, now that's evolved to, it's not just about pushing our products into new markets, but also how do we actually scale up our e-commerce engine and use data in a much more integrated way across the companies that we're acquiring, so that we can bring much more value to our customers. Now, doing something like that then requires that company to invest in changing systems, in upgrading their data, in upgrading their capabilities for how they use that data. So it's more work than just buying and integrating the company, but it's creating significantly more value both for their customers and certainly for their shareholders.
Okay, but what are the biggest challenges for companies that are looking to expand right now?
Well, assuming that indeed you're expanding through an acquisition, then indeed it is like Matt was saying. So how do we get the value out of it? And in the past, what organizations have only looked at is where are their cost synergies and where can I, reduce some overhead or other obvious procurement savings, and that will be that. Now it really is fundamentally looking at a different way of working and implementing that. And that means looking at your ecosystem. So that particular example that Matt was referring to, they also started to work with joint venture parties, for example, to really scale and grow even faster. And what it means is also how do you keep your people engaged throughout that process? Because that's another thing that we've seen over the past couple of years, also during COVID, the Great Resignation, many people reconsidering what they want in life and making different choices. And for organizations, it's exceptionally important to keep that talent and keep them motivated also in times of significant change, like a transaction.
And you know what people want.
Well, I don't know everything what people want, but we've seen a lot of things. And in that sense, it's very interesting. In a transaction and also in difficult times, yes, people are very different globally. People are very different in different industries or age categories. But fundamentally, there's a lot of similar things driving people.
The common knee-jerk reaction in most organizations in economically difficult times is to cut costs.
It is,
and they focus only on cutting costs, and that's maybe a too shallow focus.
Not only maybe too shallow focus, it's actually quite harmful. We have research that we've proven time and time again. Every time there's a recession that happens, we do this research, and not just us, many other organizations, it always gives you the same results, that companies that are focused investors during recessionary periods end up emerging stronger and better than anyone else. And so that means being very focused about where you're investing. Yes, you may cut costs, but you cut costs in the areas that really have grown over the years, but perhaps are no longer differentiating or no longer really important to the future. So it forces you to focus and then invest and rechannel those costs towards growth opportunities. And that's what makes you stronger. So I think you're absolutely right in that it is a huge mistake to only focus on cutting costs and hunkering down and hoping that you'll somehow emerge better and everything will go back to normal. And instead, if you take charge of your own future by rechanneling those costs that you've cut into growth areas, it gives you the opportunity to really shape your own direction.
Okay, but I would say it's a bad idea to lay people off that you had a really hard time to get them on board in the first place.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is that companies indeed are very much scrutinizing where do we need our people in what functions, on what levels, or which parts of the organization. So indeed, you don't want to be too quick on that. On the other hand, when we see where technology is taking us and the opportunity that is providing, in some cases, that does mean that you just don't require that many people anymore. And then that is also the healthy choice to make for an organization.
Okay. You both say that this is, in fact, a great time to do some acquisitions because they turn out really well for most companies.
If you do the work to actually get the value and make those acquisitions integrate and work, yes.
Yeah. Okay, but what does that take? I mean, most companies will not have the risk appetite that is needed to be aggressive right now.
Yeah, well, I think it does start with identifying what is the right fit. Just thinking, now is a great time to buy. Let's see what's out there, and if it would, if we can make it work. That is not the route to go, right? So it really starts with what is your purpose? Where do you want to go as an organization? Where do you see growth? And is there a target out there that could really help with that, right? That really is fundamentally step one. Then there's the whole transaction process, and is it even up for sale? So that's step number 2. And then do you end up with the right valuation? These times will help in that. And then indeed comes, the part that I like the most is how do you then bring both organizations together and make it into a success?
Let me add, I think there's another very important piece to that, which is to look at all the things you should stop doing. The big mistake most organizations make is they just keep doing whatever they've done. And it's not just what do I go acquire, but what do I stop? Maybe what do I myself exit from my organization and sell off? And getting that focus is critically important.
What should companies do right now, or management? What should they focus on?
I think step number 1 is to use this opportunity to look into the future and look at what is the value you need to create for your customers and for society, for your organization to succeed? As Annemiek said, that also starts in your purpose. What are we really up to? Is what we're doing consistent with the future that we want to create? And if we really want to maximize value in the future, what's the best way to do that? Are we the right owners of the assets that we have? Or is there somebody else that may be the right owner for these assets? Are there other assets out there that we might be the right owners for and we can really generate value from? So it's answering these questions up front, and that then helps you get focused on where do you cut costs and then where do you invest as well for growth.
Okay. One more thing I didn't mention was the COVID-19 pandemic. Did that change things?
It has, in the sense that COVID-19 accelerated the pace of transformation. Even before COVID-19, we had digital disruption. We had all sorts of changes happening in the economy and society. The climate crisis was as real then as it is now. What has happened since COVID-19, though, is it's accelerated the pace of change. One, because leadership teams and businesses learned that when a crisis like that happened, they could actually work much faster. We were all forced to change our ways of operating and doing business, and organizations figured it out. So they've learned actually that there is a different way to do things. And in many cases, you see, for example, the pace of e-commerce pick up. One statistic that has been doing the rounds recently is that you and I as consumers are now much more willing to interact digitally and use self-service than having to speak to someone for customer service, because we got used to online interaction during COVID. And so that's now accelerated the pace of digital transformation in how you engage customers. That's just one example, but you see that happening in industries all over. And as a result, you now see companies moving much faster around their transformation agenda.
Okay, but does it help companies to grab the opportunity and especially see the opportunity instead of a risk?
Yes, I think it does. It just provides more clarity on the different choices that are there. Because some of the things that we're also seeing, we've moved a lot from the extreme globalization back much more to within the region or different focus, because we've also seen some of the risks that this fully global economy has, right? So it is just increased focus, I think, for organizations on where there's opportunities and where there's threats, and the confidence that they can change where needed, because we've all shown that.
Okay, and if we wrap this up and look for the levers to pull or the buttons to push to be more resilient as a company in these challenging times, what will be your top 3?
Yeah, I think
suggestions.
So many suggestions, but indeed, let's try to keep it to 3. No, I think the one, and that's really the key one, right? See it as an opportunity for growth. This is not the time to just ruthlessly only, hide and cut down cost. This is the time to make the fundamental choices. And when are you fit for growth, as we would call it?
Stop doing what you always did.
Stop doing what you always did. It might be that there's a part of the organization that needs to be divested. There might be an opportunity to grow through acquisitions, or it's organic change. But that it really is an opportunity. So look at it that way. Number 2, I think broadly in terms of your ecosystem around you. You don't have to do it all by yourself. And number 3, think about the people component. Your people in your organizations are the ones that will have to do it with you, and keeping them engaged and motivated, I think, is key.
That's the purpose issue, right? What you raised as well, Matt. Do you agree with the top 3 that Annemiek just
100%.
it, or do you have another?
No, that would be my top 3 as well.
Okay, and no additional. Just some last words.
Well,
to wrap it up,
I'd say again, see this as an opportunity. If there's nothing you take away from this discussion, take that away. This is a time that you can really do some magical things with your organization, with your people, and you can really solve some big problems that society needs businesses to solve. We need businesses to actually transform themselves, to be better citizens, to be able to clean the planet, and to make this a better environment for all of us. So use this as an opportunity for that change.
And that altogether will make companies more resilient in economic turbulent times.
Absolutely. Not only more resilient, but much more value creating for their people, their shareholders, and their broader stakeholders in society.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a great closing speech, Matt. Thank you, Matt Mani en Annemieke Hoekstra from PwC. En jullie bedankt voor het luisteren. Dit was een andere kijk op zaken.